Hello everybody, Pokemon Trainer Rob here, and welcome to the final video of the Pokemon Emerald project. That's right, we are finally at the end of this marathon of a playthrough, and I couldn't be happier about it. In this video, we will go through the final Battle Frontier challenge, and afterwards, I'm going to take a super long break from the world of Pokemon, because my god, this postgame has been absolutely brutal. Okay, I won't dwell on it that much, as we have had some nice success here, and it was unique to see how this game expanded on the idea of actually having a post-game set of challenges that was different from just going back to Kanto again. But I'm still not 100% certain if the Battle Frontier was the best way to do that. I'll get into this more at the end of the video though, as you guys probably just want to see me get started. Anyway, if you guys thought the Battle Pike was unique, just wait until you see the Battle Pyramid. While both of these institutions are more involved than just having a simple trainer fight each round, the Battle Pyramid is more like a dungeon. You have 7 floors of darkness you have to navigate through, floors that are filled with wild Pokemon and with Pokemon trainers, and every time you defeat a Pokemon, whether it's a wild one or one from a trainer, your vision range gets a little better, allowing you to see more in each of the floors. Ultimately, you have to find the blue teleporter to get to the next floor. Once you make it through 7 floors, you win the round and continue as such. At the end of round 3 and round 10, you'll have your Frontier Brain encounter, the former for the silver symbol and the latter for the gold. So that means you must navigate 21 and 70 floors if you want to get the full honors of clearing this building. Much like the Battle Pike though, you don't get healing for each floor. Rather, in this challenge, you get to use items, but not items from your bag. In this challenge, you are issued a special battle bag, which allows you to store items that you find in the Battle Pyramid on each of the dungeon floors. These items can consist of basic healing and battle items, as well as special hold items. Oh yeah, those hold items that you have outside the pyramid that you have in your main game, you can't use them for this challenge. Anything you want to take advantage of, you must find inside the darkness, which adds a nice degree of resource management to your strategy, in addition to your general team composition. Also, whenever you complete a round of the Battle Pyramid, any items you had before will carry over to future rounds. So if you found a nice hold item you want to keep using, you'll still have it as long as you don't throw it away in the pyramid. You just can't take it outside of the pyramid. I was a bit indecisive at first in terms of what Pokemon I wanted to bring with me for this challenge. Kip was locked in for sure, but between Sig, Slavko, and Bowser Girl, I was unsure of which combination of 2 I wanted to move forward with. I ultimately landed on Bowser Girl and Slavko again, after a few rounds, just because I felt the most confident in their particular bulkiness. Although, I did briefly consider Dark Lord as well. If he had more HP, I would have probably gone for him. It's also worth mentioning that trainers, with exception to the Frontier Brain, only have 1 Pokemon here as opposed to 3, which does lighten the load a little in terms of stressful battles. You'll just have loads and loads of wild encounters instead. And finally, due to the super repetitive nature of this, and the fact that this took around 5 hours to record, you can bet that this will be expedited quite a bit in this video. There's just not a lot to talk about here once you get a general feel for how this place works. Anyway, let's get right into it. Since this was pretty much my first time at the Battle Pyramid, the first round was a little noobish, let's just say. But I think that's to be expected since this was essentially the first time I was attempting this challenge, so it's only natural that I would be making some questionable decisions. For starters, I started trying to run away from every wild battle, which is something you can do to conserve on HP and PP, but ultimately you could probably get more value out of knocking out the Pokemon to increase your vision range. You don't technically need to fight a single Pokemon to move on to the next floor, but the vision does help. Since these floors are randomly generated, you have no idea where the transporter could be, and you can find some good items along the way, stuff that could conceivably help you for future rounds. Also, ethers are pretty common in here, so if you get low on your knockout moves, like Earthquake in Kip's case, you might have a way to restore the PP of that move. Some other items that are absolute godsends in here are revives, hyper potions, as well as specific berries that can be used for healing status conditions. And of course, there are some good hold items you can find, stuff like leftovers, Focus Band, and the Choice Band. I got lucky in this first round in the first few floors, and if you paid attention to the footage from earlier, you may have noticed this too, but I got a hint that the wild Pokemon I'd be mostly against in this first round would be Pokemon that can paralyze, which means electric Pokemon, and since we have Kip, that means the stab moves we'll be up against won't have any effect. So he'll do a good job of protecting the front lines as long as he's not fainted. But since I was still getting my feet wet, Kip unfortunately fainted on the first floor, and I was already down one Pokemon. I at least got some revives from the first floor, so it wasn't all for naught at least. I eventually found the teleporter and moved on to floor 2, which only took a few seconds because I got lucky, and the teleporter was really close to the start. That can actually happen in here quite a bit, so don't get discouraged if a floor takes you longer than usual. However, be warned that a freebie floor like this could cause you to miss out on some good items if you decide to exit a floor too fast and quickly. It's a risk-reward scenario, you could say. On the third floor, Sig faces a lot of trainers, gets paralyzed by a wild Electabuzz, and finds an Ether. Also, I did run into a wild Shedinja in here, which does make this worth mentioning. Make sure you have something that can attack this Wonder Guarding beast. Its weaknesses are Fire, Flying, Rock, Ghost, and Dark type moves. It only has 1 HP, so no matter what, the moves will KO. But if you don't have any moves that are of that type, well, you're screwed. Thankfully, you can run away from wild ones, but trainer fights? Different story. Thankfully, I'm covered with any possible team comps I have in my squad, since 4 of my Pokemon have moves that will work against Shedinja. Floor 4 was another freebie, but Floor 5 was anything but free. Sig finally went down in battle, and I was not looking too hot at this point. However, almost seamlessly, like a gift from the heavens, I stumble upon an item that answers my literal prayers. A Sacred Ash healing item. What does this do? Why, it revives all down Pokemon to max HP, of course. Just what I needed. Now, while this is a good thing for me at this point, looking back at it now, I kinda wish I hadn't used it, because this could have been so much more clutch in a future round if things were not looking great, instead of round 1, where I'm up against lower IVs anyway. However, I figured that if I failed this run, I would have just lost it anyway, so I didn't let it sink in too much. I finish Floor 5, Floor 6, and get the blessing of a lifetime as the game decides to give me another Sacred Ash on floor number 7. Yeah, I'm going to try and conserve this as long as possible, believe you me. But after finding the teleporter on floor 7, that's actually it for the Battle Pyramid. Round completed. So if you want to get the symbols for this place, you need to do this a couple of times. Thankfully for the silver, it's only 2 additional rounds, which I think is actually quite doable. The IVs aren't too tough, and you can luck out on some of the floors with some close teleporter spawns. For the gold, however, yeah, I'm admitting it now, I used save states again, and did actually need them on pretty much every round from 4 onward. I think for maybe one of the later rounds, I didn't because I got insanely lucky with teleporters, but still, the Battle Pyramid is brutal and probably the hardest establishment to get through just for the endurance required alone. From a gameplay standpoint, the palace is pretty rough too, but at least for that you have to do 4 less rounds instead of the full 10. But yeah, save states were certainly used, but much like in the previous 2 buildings, I only used them for the start of each round, and not each individual floor. Although dang, just thinking about it now, you could totally use that to cheat on every floor by scouting out the layout, and just head straight for the teleporter on each reload. But enough about cheating, let's continue. As I said before, don't expect me to cover this place as extensively as the other challenges, as you'll experience rather high volumes of fights, especially wild Pokemon. However, I'll definitely highlight some of the major occurrences of each round. For instance, did you know that you can run into shiny Pokemon in the Battle Pyramid? Well, you definitely can, and I definitely did in Floor 3 of Round 2 when a shiny Butterfree appeared as a wild encounter. Unfortunately, you don't get Pokeballs in the pyramid though, so this one had to be let go. Still a very notable appearance. Also on Floor 3, I discovered perhaps the establishment's biggest MVP for me, the Choice Band. A hold item that locks a Pokemon into using the same move for an entire battle, but That move gets powered up as a result. Now, I personally still prefer the type boosting items, but the Choice Band will be a good alternative here, especially on Kip, so I'm not at all complaining about this find. I'm also not entirely sure of how much more damage a Choice Band move will do, as opposed to a stab move with an item like Miracle Water or Soft Sand. Hell, Choice Band may actually be better in that case. Aside from those occurrences though, nothing major really happened in this round. Round 3 is pretty much the same, but it does have the distinction of having the Pyramid Frontier brain at the end of it, so that automatically makes it more eventful. Although, one thing I did find very interesting was the fact that I found not one, but 2 focus bands in this round. And you want to know what's even crazier? They were both in the same room too, only like 20 or 30 steps away from each other. What are the freaking chances of that? Anyway, Focus Band was another item I highlighted earlier, and although I wouldn't say it's as good as the Choice Band, it does give you some assurance if you are unable to avoid a super strong attack that could KO your Pokemon. So I have to give it some props, especially since we found 2 of them no less. At the end of round 3 though, when we approach the top of the pyramid, we run into the Pyramid King Brandon, and he will be our next symbol challenge. Now, Brandon himself is actually not too hard, and thankfully our team of Kit, Bowser Girl, and Slavko will be more than enough to take him down, because he has the 3 Reggies as his team. Now, the Reggies themselves are pretty bulky, but they have some very nice weaknesses that we'll be able to take advantage of. Hell, both Kip and Bowser Girl have a type advantage over 2 of them specifically, and as long as we get through both Rock and Steel, Slav shouldn't have any issues either. The battle starts with Kip versus Regirock, and the 2 Pokemon trade Earthquakes. Kip is just a fair bit faster than Regirock, so we do get the first kill, but Regirock does get a critical on us, making us vulnerable to the next Pokemon, Registeel. We get another Earthquake in, but Registeel has Earthquake too, so Kip goes down. Bowser Girl comes out, and to no one's surprise, Registeel uses Earthquake again, but since it's not Stab, and Bowser Girl is tanky, she survives and finishes off this Pokemon with a Flamethrower. Last out is Regice, and it uses Thunder? Well, I guess Ice wouldn't be that effective, huh? Still though, it does decent damage, but we live and get another Flamethrower out there before we ultimately go down to the finishing Ice Beam. Slavko is out last, and all we need is 1 Hyper Beam to finish off this Pokemon and get our Pyramid symbol, the Brave symbol. And with that, we've obtained all the symbols of the Battle Frontier, achieving my initial goal for this part of the playthrough. However, you know the drill, I'm going to do one last push for you guys, and myself, as we aim to make this symbol gold. The next 2 rounds weren't very eventful, so I'll just show some small bits of footage from those rounds and mention a few other things that you might want to look out for while doing this challenge. First, you do have an item limit when it comes to your battle bag, and I believe that limit is 10 different items. Now, you can have multiple stacks, up to 99 of one specific item, but if you find a unique 11th item, you'll leave it on the side unless you discard something. So make sure you have room if you find something you want. Also, remember that when you finish a round, any items that you have on your Pokemon as hold items must be returned to the bag. So if your bag is already full and you have hold items on, the game will make you do inventory then and there to remedy that problem. I found myself usually tossing temp stat buffing items like X attacks, X specials, and dire hits, that kind of stuff. While I don't doubt that they have some use in battle, in a place like this where an item use is the equivalent of losing a turn, giving your opponent a chance to do damage or put a status on your Pokemon, it's not worth slightly better performance in just one battle. I also talked about Shedinja earlier, but there are a few other Pokemon you may want to look out for. Wobbuffet for its ridiculous counter strats and its ability to prevent you from running in battle, Breloom for its Effect Spore ability, any Pokemon that knows Self-Destruct or Explosion like Weezing, Claydol, and Solrock, and perhaps the one that threw me off the most, Pokemon that can use Grudge, namely Ninetales. Remember, Grudge will remove all the PP for a move if you happen to make a Pokemon faint with that move in particular, which, in an endurance challenge like this, that is not a happy prospect. Thankfully, Ethers are plentiful enough here, but only use them if you really feel like you need them. I found myself not worrying about it much if I was already on the 6th or 7th floor and about done with that round. Also, much like the Battle Pike, double battles are also a thing and can initiate if you meet the eyes of 2 different trainers at once. Don't have much to say about this though, aside from the fact that it can happen, and there may be some rooms where the teleporter is being blocked by 2 trainers in a double battle formation. Like the Battle Pike, each trainer just has 1 Pokemon though, so they aren't terribly difficult if you have a good double battle setup in mind. When I made it to round 6 and 7, I was honestly starting to get pretty exhausted at this place, and I admittedly started considering to use save states on every floor as opposed to every round, as the Pokemon were getting tougher and any restart I had to do could happen at the expense of 30 minutes of wasted time, and I just wanted to be done with this place. I ultimately still stuck with my previous rules though, and I just did my best to try to be as efficient with my floor exploration as possible, especially since I was feeling pretty confident with my item load at this point. My process on every floor was really just trying to find the nearest wall and walk around the perimeter of the room, hoping I would ultimately run into the teleporter. And for the most part, that did work, and in some cases, I got incredibly lucky. Hell, in one of my attempts, I found the teleporter in what felt like 2 seconds. There is still a huge degree of randomness though, so understand that this is just what worked for me, and even then, it wasn't completely foolproof. As far as any additional items are concerned, if they were near me, I picked them up, but at this point, I was no longer going out of my way to find them. However, there were still some good pickups. In round 7, I did find a scope lens, which does increase the chance of critical hits landing from Pokemon holding the item. Although I still found the Choice Band to be my MVP here, this was definitely something I could see getting some use out of if I found it earlier, especially if a Pokemon has a move that already has a higher crit chance as it is. I also found a 3rd Focus Band, which... yay, I guess? Round 8 and round 9 were also kinda snoozers, but at least the light was at the end of the tunnel. No pun intended, this darkness is truly getting on my last nerves. Another item I got some use out of was a Fluffy Tail I found during round 9. This item allows you to escape a wild encounter without failure, even if your opponent has a move or ability that prevents escape. Now, generally you want to defeat wild Pokemon to increase your sight, but sometimes if you're in a battle with a Wobbuffet for example, having something like this can be incredibly useful, so don't be afraid to keep one of those on hand just in case. Let's go ahead and get straight to round 10, the final round of the Battle Pyramid. I apologize again if it seems like I'm just skipping through so many of these rounds, but give me a break. This challenge took me around 5 or 6 hours to fully record, and it's incredibly repetitive and monotonous. Round 10 actually had a very expedited start, and as a result of that start, I decided to actually look a little further in this floor just to see if I could get anything good. And I'm glad I did, because this floor actually gave me a 2nd Choice Band. Not that I really needed it at this point, but still, if you're a little nervous about the upcoming rematch with Brandon, this should give you a little extra power to work with. I also didn't worry about fighting trainers or wild Pokemon as much in this round, since I knew I was going to heal up before Brandon anyway. So if the battle meant more sight or a direct line to the teleporter, it was more than worth the struggle. Also, I found another really good item during this round, one that I really wish I would have found earlier, as 4-6 has some nice leftovers. And after the entire Battle Frontier, we all know what leftovers do. Give them to a bulky Pokemon of yours, and the constant and consistent healing will keep it alive for even longer. And there is definitely nothing wrong with that. But yeah, after 70 brutal floors of darkness, even more if you consider all the failed attempts, we're ready for the final Frontier rematch in the last Pokemon battle of Pokemon Emerald. Brandon decides to switch out the Reggies for a different legendary trio set, this time the legendary Birds of Kanto. I also wish I would have switched my party order around, because Brandon of course starts with Articuno, the one bird that Kip could conceivably have some issues with. Despite that, I switch over to Slavko and start using some Thunderbolts. Unfortunately though, Thunderbolt is not doing a lot of damage even with the Choice Band, so it takes 3 hits plus 2 loafing turns to take out the Ice Bird, when in Hyper Beam probably would have taken 2, maybe even 1. Thankfully, Articuno only used Blizzard, which has a low accuracy, and hit me only 1 time anyway. Zapdos is out second, and I switch back over to Kip. Now, thankfully being ground type does prevent Zapdos from electrifying me, but it's still going to be using Drill Peck, a really powerful flying move. And with Kip, since ground won't affect Zapdos either because it's a flying type, I have to resort to Ice Beam since Surf won't be very effective either. 3 Ice Beams later and a lot of Drill Peck damage on me, Zapdos goes down, which means we only have 1 Kentucky Fried Moltres away from getting the final gold symbol. I switch to Bowser Girl really just as a stall since Kip is locked into Ice Beam anyway, and when she goes down, I switch over to Slab, and for the final time this playthrough, I click on Hyper Beam and unload the final attack on the Flame Bird, defeating it and getting the gold Brave symbol. Guys, we've done it. We've completed Pokemon Emerald. We've become the champion of Hoenn, and we've even mastered the 7 Battle Frontier challenges as well. Oh man, it feels so good to be done with this. I started this playthrough back in April of this year, which means I've been doing this game for 8 freaking months. Given I did some breaks here and there, but this is hands down the longest playthrough I've done, perhaps in my entire channel's history. Even if some of the Fire Emblem playthroughs were longer in terms of videos, all the prep work and the training and the hours and hours of cut footage, yeah, sorry, there's no comparison. But it feels good to be done, and I'm happy you guys were here to join me on this journey. Now, before we get into closing off the Battle Frontier, what rewards do we even get from doing this? Well, if you visit Scott and talk to him after getting all the symbols, you get a Landsat Berry for all silvers and a Starf Berry for all golds. These are incredibly rare berries, and you can even plant them in your berry farms to get some more, but yeah, that's really about it. You can also go to the Records Hall and take a gander at your stats as well if you want, but aside from those things, you really don't get anything else for getting all the symbols in the Battle Frontier. Just the symbols themselves and the mass amounts of BP you've likely accumulated through doing this. Huh. Not sure how I feel about that. I guess this ultimately leads to just one question, though. Do I think the Battle Frontier is worth completing? At least to the extent that I did in this playthrough anyway. Well, in the wise words of Wu Commander Sun Jian,
I don't think so.
Yeah, not gonna lie, even though there were some great moments and incredibly clutch happenings here, the Battle Frontier was definitely an overwhelming experience for me. And sure, while some of this was most definitely brought on by me and my perfectionist nature, and the desire to cover as much as I could for this playthrough, I think if you're going to tease players with getting the symbols as a post-game challenge, it should at least be more streamlined, and the reward should feel way more worth it, at least in my opinion. Of these challenges, I enjoyed the Battle Factory and the Battle Dome the most, and to a lesser extent, the Battle Tower, Battle Arena, and Battle Pike were fine too. There could have just been some small alterations to make them a little more enjoyable and interesting. The Battle Palace and Battle Pyramid, though, oh boy, they were brutal. They were easily the most luck-dependent, and I'm sorry, the Battle Pyramid just took way too long to do, even for the amount of stuff they crammed into it. I think the Pyramid could have easily removed either the wild encounters or just the darkness mechanic to make it way more enjoyable, because in its current state, I don't think I ever want to do it again if I'm being honest. At least with the Battle Palace, even though I hated my actions being taken out of my hands, it is one of the shorter gauntlets, and now that I know how it works, I'd almost want to try again in the future using more diverse movesets to see if that makes the process a little easier and more reasonable, because I hated losing turns in that place. But yeah, the Pyramid was just a little too ambitious, I think, and although I do respect the attempt of trying something this ambitious, it was still a bit too much for me. Honestly, I feel like a good way to balance and fix my issues with the Battle Frontier is just make the gold symbol requirements lower. Instead of 8 or 10 rounds for some of these challenges, why not 5? Offer the silver symbol at 2 rounds to show that you're capable of keeping a streak going, and then 5 to round out at a nice midway rounded number. Save the higher streaks and heavy BP rewards for those who want to keep a streak going for even longer, and if you're truly dedicated to perfecting your performance in any one establishment. As of now, at least from my perspective, the institutions are designed to appear as post-game gym battles, and make people want to collect all the symbols or badges of each of these destinations, much like they did in the main story of the game, you know? The problem is, you need to devote so much more time to these places if you want to succeed here. In some cases, maybe even making you doubt if your long-term Pokemon team is really even that good enough to handle this, and I think that kind of sends the wrong message here. Again, at least in my opinion. I absolutely loved my team for this playthrough, and it never really felt right that I had to bench half of them each time I took on one of these challenges. Especially since, due to the difficulty of this place, Dark Lord and Iceman were not seen very often since my other members were just so much better for what I needed to do in these trials. And that's a shame, honestly. I just think the Battle Frontier, while a good idea on paper, was just kind of mishandled. So much of keeping your streak going depends on luck, and the gold symbol requirements are just way too high. Aside from that, these were some interesting challenges, and I'm glad I got the chance to experience them. I just don't really see myself experiencing them to this extent ever again. If anyone else is interested in taking on the Battle Frontier challenge, I recommend only going for the silver symbols personally, and only go for the golds if it's a challenge you really, really enjoyed, like me with the Battle Factory. Otherwise, be prepared for huge time investments and micromanaging not only your Pokemon, but also their stats, their natures, their movesets, and even team compatibility. Okay, well, I think that's gonna do it for this video. Once again, thank you to everyone who came to watch this playthrough, and I hope you enjoyed our time here in Hoenn. Like I said before, the next main Pokemon playthrough will be either Pokemon Fire Red or Pokemon Leaf Green. But that won't be for a few years because I need a Poke break right now. This has been Pokemon Trainer Rob saying, once again, adios until we meet again in the world of Pokemon. Later, folks.